Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. This world has been created. Qin Mu and the rest soon realized that such a small world, they had soon reached its top, couldn't have been born naturally. Qin Mu let the flood dragons protect them while flying above the Milky Way, but while rising, they collided with an invisible barrier. They couldn't see it, but it truly existed there. It was the barrier of the world they were in, acting like a wall which separated it from the others. The reason why they thought that the world was created was because the instant they collided with the invisible barrier, countless beehive-shaped seals appeared while giving off thumping sounds. They swiftly spread out through the sky, and it looked as though the group had entered a huge beehive. It was quite a familiar sight to Qin Mu. He had seen it at Ghost Valley. The ancient gods had used beehive seals to block off the tear between Yudu world and the real world. Now, it seemed that they were used as the wall for the world made by the gods as well. We have no way to take a detour, we can only go through the Milky Way. Qin Mu examined the darkness in the surroundings. With the barrier blocking their way, they couldn't go through the sky, but only through the Milky Way, barging their way into Sunwell. This space seems strange. It doesn't look huge, and the distance between Sunwell and Moonwell is also too short. They are at most 5 miles away, Qin Mu said. However, from the map of Great Ruins, Moonwell and Sunwell are tens of thousands of miles apart. What happened here? Cai Yunxiang pondered it for a moment, then said, teleportation divine art. No. It should be overlapped space, but that's not right as well. This is a complete space and there's no overlap. What divine art is this exactly? The two wells in Great Ruins were tens of thousands of miles apart, yet they were only 3 to 5 miles apart in Star Sea. However, when looking at the starry sky in Eternal Peace Empire, the stars were very close to each other, but they were actually very far from each other. This place was the opposite of reality, and this really made them click their tongues in wonder. Cai Yunxiang was also confused. She didn't know what kind of divine art could have caused such an unusual sight. Qin Mu smiled and said, the gods of ancient Great Ruins possessed remarkable abilities and many divine arts that were never passed on to us. Maybe they had created this place just for the sake of opening up a passage that's convenient for them to move around Great Ruins. Let's go to Sunwell first. 9 flood dragons covered the group while flying toward the Milky Way, but they soon grew nervous, with huge rocks the size of mountains everywhere around them. The rocks collided here and there, causing confusion. Whenever a star the size of a mountain came rushing toward them, the flood dragons would execute their divine arts to push the star away. Those stars were also man-made, and their sizes weren't too great. However, there were some unique ones among them, like those made of fine jade that was sparkling and translucent. They glowed as they streaked past them. How pretty. This is bad. Qin Mu's face changed drastically, and the sound of the flute could be heard. The body of the numerous flood dragons hurriedly shrunk, and they all swarmed over to climb on his body. Qin Mu then threw Hu Linga onto his shoulder and grabbed Cai Yunxiang while shouting, "Fatty dragon, into the nest, now." He brought Hu Linga and Cai Yunxiang inside, while the dragon Qilin jumped after in a hurry too. At that moment, the glow of the star that looked like a fine jade became incomparably radiant. The next instant, sword lights of all color swept through the sky, covered the whole place as they shot at the stars the size of mountains in all directions. They were pierced through by the sword lights, earning thousands and thousands of holes. Luckily, Qin Mu had brought the bunch of dragons, Hu Linga and Cai Yunxiang, into the dragon's nest. Countless flying swords swept above them, and Hu Linga immediately shrunk her head back. A few strands of her fur were sliced off, and the dragon Qilin hurriedly pulled back his tail. A sword light swept past it at that moment, and 2 scales fell off. Everyone was still in a panicked state when the star made of fine jade vanished into thin air. Suddenly, multicolored flying swords came streaking across the sky above the dragon's nest like a meteor shower. As they collided, they transformed into a star made of fine jade and floated away into the distance. What a huge sword pellet! Hu Linga was stunned by the sight. The dragon Qin muttered, "It's even bigger than Cult Master's sword pellet." Qin Mu was also flabbergasted. There was actually such a huge sword pellet in the world. He had thought that his sword pellet was already huge, yet only a glance at the one they just saw was enough to know that his paled into insignificance by comparison. Could this be the treasure of a god? They flew out of the dragon's nest. Qin Mu had the flood dragons form their divine dragon cover once again while others carried the dragon's nest. He acted more and more careful. Divine dragon cover was a divine art from Ling family's 9 dragons divine fire cover. It was originally a divine art for offense, but Qin Mu used it to control the 9 dragons as a formation skill. In his heart, the marvel of use lay in the heart and soul. There was never many rules for him. Some people felt his thoughts were unconstrained in style while some felt that he was going astray from the path, but he didn't care. In the chaotic Milky Way, stars came crashing against each other from time to time, and even the divine dragon cover formed by powerful flood dragons suffered damage. Some bones were broken, and some tendons snapped. Qin Mu had to continuously refine spirit pills and miraculous medicines to heal the injured dragons while having other dragons take the place of the injured ones to maintain divine dragon cover. After a painstaking journey, they finally came to the core of the Milky Way and got close to the 2 divine wells. That place was relatively safe as the stars were swirling around Sunwell and Moonwell. There were only a few of them around. Cai Yunxiang let out a sigh of relief and said in bewilderment, "Cult Master, this place is so dangerous and we needed over a dozen flood dragons to protect us. We even had to hide inside the dragon's nest from time to time to avoid danger, so how did the Sun Guardian come here?" Qin Mu raised his head and saw Sunwell and Moonwell as well as a huge, thick pillar of light shooting upward. There were 2 large circular holes above it, like the openings of the wells. Since they are sun herders, of course they would drive Sunship to this place. Besides, the abilities of Sun Guardian are extremely high. She's an existence that's like a heavenly god. Cai Yunxiang jumped in shock. An existence like heavenly gods? Qin Mu didn't explain. The flood dragons flew toward the pillar of light above. Suddenly, Qin Mu looked down, and he couldn't help being stunned. He saw that there were huge balls of light filling in the huge sun well that looked like huge suns. Of course, those suns weren't huge, so they were probably treasures forged by gods. However, with so many of them squeezed in a deep well, he was still rather blown away. Since the sun on Sunship had extinguished, why don't they fish a sun from here? Just as he thought that, the sounds of chains rattling came from above, and an incomparably thick black chain came from the opening of the well. It was let down continuously, getting closer and closer to the sun's inside. "Young master, are the sun herders trying to hook a sun?" Hu Linger asked in astonishment. Qin Mu was also startled. There were a few huge hooks hanging below the chain, so the people above had to be trying to hook and bring up a sun from the sun well. However, he soon saw the black iron chains become scarlet red from the heat. Before they even reached the middle section of the well, they already looked like about to melt. Molten iron slowly flowed down the chain, dripping into the water. Not only that, the hooks had also softened from the heat, so before the black iron chain could even get close to the suns, the hooks were already gone. In no time, the black iron chain also snapped from the heat. Rattling sounds came from above, and a sigh sounded out from the side of the well. "We still can't fish one out." The flood dragons flew to the opening of the well. The closer they got, the wider the opening became. When the flood dragons had carried Qin Mu and the rest out, Sunwell had already become a huge hole that was 500 miles wide. Looking down it, Qin Mu couldn't see anything except for the glaring rays of the suns that were shooting straight out and shining on the sky. The rays then scattered and formed a huge dome which covered the place. The sun well looked more like an incomparably huge mirror that could shine back the rays of light. We didn't catch a sun, but instead got a flood dragon." A resounding voice came from the side of the well, full of astonishment. Qin Mu and the rest looked toward the source and saw a few giants of the Sun Herd tribe standing nearby. They looked like priests and were pulling onto a chain while looking at them in astonishment. Qin Mu walked to the head of the flood dragon in 2 to 3 steps and said with a smile, "Man of Carefree Village, Qin Mu, I'm here to meet the Sun Guardian." May elders please inform her. Visitor from Carefree Village. The strong practitioners of Sun Herd tribe were astonished and hurriedly threw down their chains to greet in a loud voice, Visitor from Carefree Village, please wait a moment for us to go inform her. When they were done, they immediately turned to leave. They seemed to be mistaken. I just said I'm a man of Carefree Village, not that I was from Carefree Village. Qin Mu scratched his head and let the flood dragons land beside the well. Looking at how respectful the Sun Herders were, they had to be telling the higher-ups of the tribe to hold a grand welcome for him. Sai Yinxiang knocked on the dragon's nest and shouted inside, Princess Xiao, we are at the Sunwell, come out quickly. Ling Yuxiao woke up from her meditative state and leaped up, transforming into a trail of dragon qi. She changed back when she landed on the ground. Sai Yunxiang was extremely envious. Plump Chest Princess's cultivation has improved drastically in this short while, she's even stronger than me now. Ling Yuxiao looked around, and her mind trembled violently. She kept looking at the huge ship which had stopped not far from Sunwell. Even if it was not her first time seeing Sun Ship, it was still hard for her to conceal the shock in her heart. Sun Ship was simply too huge, and its chains were dragging a black sun as it crawled on the ground. The deck of that ship was a piece of land on which tens of thousands of people could live and reproduce. She looked at the surroundings, and her heart was shaken once more. The Sunwell was shrouded by a dome which formed a unique space that emanated with an energy that made people stir restlessly. Qi of pure yang. Qin Mu in the meantime was examining a huge stone tablet beside the well. Hulinger came forward then and took out a small booklet, brush, and ink, planning to copy the writings on the tablet. Ever since she had started learning how to write and read from deaf, she had become super serious, copying down every word she encountered. However, she didn't recognize the words on the tablet, so she could only ask, Young master, what's written here? These are inscriptions in a god language, it records the history below Sunwell. He then read out for her, the emperor ordered Ziqing to forge Sun and Moon well, but she was naughty and mischievous. 100 years passed, and nothing was done. The emperor was furious and ordered her to be put to death. Ziqing then trembled with fear. The wells were forged in 50 years, yet there was no light from the suns and moons inside them. At that time, she took out her eyes and dropped them into the wells. From that moment on, there was light from the suns and moons. The emperor then ordered the court recorder to erect a memorial tablet. He raised his head up to look at the black sun floating above Sun Ship and said, that sun had God Ziqing's blood, which was why it could burst forth with radiance, however, I've no idea why it went out. The sun was extinguished because of powerful enemies. Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and saw several hundred Sun Herders walking over to them. Their bodies were all gigantic. The one in the lead was the old chief of the Sun Herd tribe. When he saw Qin Mu, he was slightly stunned and revealed an expression of disappointment. So it's the little friend from Border Dragon City, I thought it was someone from Carefree Village. Little friend, what are you here for? Qin Mu smiled and said, to meet Sun Guardian. The old chief shook his head and said, Sun Guardian doesn't have long to live, so we are currently choosing a new Sun Guardian. Since little friend has deep connections with Carefree Village, stay and witness the ceremony. Qin Mu's heart trembled, and worry showed up on his face. Didn't Yang Jingjing still have many years to live? Why? The devil gods of a foreign territory attacked Sunwell. Sun Guardian personally led everyone to defend against them, so her lifespan is more or less exhausted. The old chief sighed. Come with me, Sun Guardian should smile as she departs this world after being able to see an old friend again. The faces of the Sun Herders around were dim as their white robes fluttered in the wind. This gave a sorrowful atmosphere to their group. The old chief stopped and looked around before shouting, why the sorrowful looks? When she became the Sun Guardian, it was destined that she would have to fuse with Sun Ship and become one it, standing side by side with the ancestors. This is an honor. Why are all of you feeling sorrowful? The sky is turning dark, the devil gods from the foreign territory will try to invade again, so pick up your spirits. Qin Mu raised his head to look at him, and saw his white hair trembling. Yang Jingjing was his granddaughter. The reason he asked why all of them were in sorrow was because he could not express his own feeling. On Sunship, the qi of pure yang was even denser. Yet the place wasn't hot at all, but instead had the warmth of spring. Sunship was very large, and its land was very vast. However, to the sun herders, the resting place wasn't big at all. That was because they were all giants over 30 yards high. When Ling Yuxiu and Cai Yunxiang looked at them, they couldn't hold back their exclamations of surprise. Even the children of sun herders were about 10 yards in height. Their bodies were covered in muscles, every little movement showing it off. That sun guardian should also be a giant, Ling Yuxiu thought to herself before letting out a sigh. The one that herds cows is really here to help reignite the sun and not to flirt around. A giant wouldn't like a small thing like him. Besides, that Yang Jingjing is a god. Even if she's a female god, she must still be muscular and strong. Even a slight smile might reveal muscles on her face. Even though the beauty standard of the one that herds cows is weird, it shouldn't be weird to that extent. Qin Mu looked around. The reason sun herders were known as such was because they were a people who herded the sun. It was similar to moon herders. Their name came from the fact that they herded the moon. Since they were herders, it of course couldn't be just one sun or moon, but a bunch of them. There had been a point in time when sun herders drove numerous suns through the land in darkness. They would move from the east to the west to drive away the darkness. When night time came, moon herders would bring out moons to travel great ruins, looping forward and backward. Sunship looked even more dilapidated than before. The previous time Qin Mu had seen it, the deck had been still looked quite good. Even though there had been numerous traces of battle, the sun herders had cleaned them up pretty nicely, so the place retained its sacredness. However, now there were crumbling fences and dilapidated walls. There were also numerous injured people of the Sun Herder tribe. When they saw the chief leading Qin Mu and the rest, they immediately held their breaths. Only when Qin Mu and the rest had walked farther away did they let out soft groans. They had gritted their teeth to lower their voices as much as possible. They were trying to preserve their dignity. "Chief, you have the most heroic warriors in this world," Qin Mu said with deep respect. "There are no cowards among the sun herders," the old chief said with a resonating voice. Qin Mu saw wisps of black smoke floating out from the wounds of sun herders. They were the burns left behind by the strong heavenly devil gods. The qi of pure yang of Sunwell was helping them to refine it. Not long later, they passed by a rundown shrine where a half-broken halberd was stabbed in the center of the huge hall. Black gas surged around it, and screeches came from within it. "Cult Master, it's a devil god weapon," Cai Yunxiang said in a low voice. Qin Mu nodded, but didn't say anything. As Heavenly Devil Cult Master, the head of the #1 sect of the Devil Path in Eternal Peace Empire, he was naturally not a stranger to the Devil Path. Qin Mu pursued knowledge to the end and applied what he knew. The marvel of use lay in his heart. In front of him was learning, discovering, and achieving. While behind was freedom from nature, the so-called Tao. That was why he didn't care about differentiating between gods and devils. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was a good example. If one's heart was of devil nature, they would see techniques of the devil path. If one's heart was of God nature, they'd find techniques of the God path. If one's heart was of the Buddha, they'd see Buddha techniques. It was clear from the wounds of sun herders and the devil god weapon that the strong practitioners who had attacked Sunwell had extremely high attainments in the devil path. Their knowledge far exceeded what he, the heavenly devil cult master, possessed. When Moon Guardian was facing the attacks of the devils from the foreign territory, he had chosen to escape and abandon his tribesmen. Sun Guardian, on the other hand, chose to accompany her tribesmen and die protecting them. Qin Mu recalled the incomparably frail girl whose legs were gnawed at by Sunship. He then thought to himself, Sun Guardian's moral integrity is much higher than that of Moon Guardian. When they passed by a ruin, they saw a huge golden bell. It was over 30 yards high, and banging sounds would ring out from time to time. At the bottom of the bell, black smoke leaked out, so there had to be something powerful suppressed inside. Some sun herders stood nearby, executing sun true fire to purify the strong practitioners inside the bell. Other than that, there were also some sun herders that were piling the corpses of strangely-shaped monsters together. They executed true fire to incinerate them, which resulted in a nauseous smell. Cai Yunxiang and Ling Yuxiu were frowning. They didn't know from which race was the enemy and why they had to attack Sunwell. Sun herders are the protectors of great ruins, even if many people don't know that they've been saved from many dangers. When Imperial Preceptor invaded great ruins, he was also forced back by the sun herders. When the gods and devils of the other races come to invade great ruins, they also had to first pass through the sun herders. Moon herders are all dead, so only sun herders are left, Qin Mu explained. Ling Yuxiu's face became slightly red. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor invaded great ruins, she was among his troops, in charge of scouting. It was also during that time that she had come in contact with Qin Mu. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had really invaded great ruins, what awaited Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would have probably been an incomparably painful lesson. They came to the center of Sun Ship and finally met Sun Guardian. Yang Jingjing was only left with her head and hands still outside. Her body had already sunk into Sun Ship, though her 4 hands were still holding onto the thick pillars, giving off a terrifying god's prestige. The old chief came to her side and said in a low voice, "Jingjing, that youth Qin Mu from Border Dragon City has come to see you." "The cowherd boy came to see me." Yang Jingjing let go of her grip on the pillars as she wanted to break free of Sun Ship, but her body had already fused with it, so she couldn't move. She panted heavily while saying, "I can't come out, I can't see you. Come over here." Qin Mu walked forward and came in front of her. Yang Jingjing's face still had a childlike look to it. She raised her eyes at Qin Mu and smiled. "You really came? It's truly wonderful to be able to meet a childhood friend again." Qin Mu stood in front of her and looked at her eyes in detail. He said in a gentle voice, "I'm here. I've grown slightly." The girl's eyes were filled with blazing flames that were like 2 small suns. They could no longer see anything, completely filled by the sun true fire. The structure of her eyes was gone. She loosened her grip on the pillars again and her body shrunk rapidly, but the ground of the sun ship shrunk as well, keeping her trapped no matter what. Sun Guardian was like this, and Moon Guardian had also been like that. As long as they took on the responsibility of Sun Guardian and Moon Guardian, they would slowly merge with Sun Ship and Moon Ship, entrusting their life to the ship. It would absorb their life force until they became one. Qin Mu's face held a complicated expression. He had become the Moon Guardian when he was searching for the people of the village. However, he had only used the ship for a short period of time, so it didn't exhaust him much. Yang Jingjing, on the other hand, had already fused with Sun Ship. She wasn't long for the world anymore. The more Sun Ship's energy was used, the more it would fuse with the Guardian, and the more it would exhaust their life. Yang Jingjing's flesh and blood had fused completely with Sun Ship. Even if Qin Mu reignited the sun, he wasn't sure if he could still save her. When the girl wasn't holding onto the pillars, she looked frail, pitifully so. Her neck was so thin that she couldn't even lift her own head, that her neck would break at any moment. She had said Qin Mu was her childhood friend, but he had only met her once. Yet it was still true, since she didn't have any playmates. She was the Sun Guardian, and the tribesmen only held respect for her. The youth in the tribe were all respectful of her and wouldn't play with her. Ever since she was young, she had carried the heavy burden of protecting her tribe and protecting great ruins. Near Border Dragon City, Qin Mu, a youth from a foreign race, had come onto her ship and chatted with her. Just because of it, she treated him as her playmate and close friend. To a certain extent, Qin Mu was similar to her. When he was young, he also didn't have any playmates. He had to learn all kinds of things from the elders in the village and train diligently. There was no one of the same age to play with him. However, Qin Mu had 9 elders who treated him with utmost care, while Yang Jingjing had elders that held respect for her. Cai Yunxiang, Hu Linga, and Ling Yuxiu came to Yang Jingjing's side with their hearts filled with sorrow. The girl before them was about the same age as them, yet the burden she bore was countless times heavier than theirs. Cai Yunxiang couldn't resist asking, the sun is extinguished, but there are still many suns in Sunwell. Why don't you guys change the sun? These chains that are chaining the black sun, why can't you use them to capture a new sun? These chains were made by the heavenly workers god race, who are already extinct, the old chief said. The chains that we, the sun herders, forge with true fire cannot withstand the true fire of the sun, so we can't fish a new sun out. We had already tried countless times. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly and he remembered Dragon Rearing Sovereign's words to mute. There are still heavenly workers in this world who could forge such a chain. The old chief took a look at him and shook his head. The remaining heavenly workers are all in Carefree Village now. If you ever return to Carefree Village, you might be able to bring a heavenly worker to save our sun herd tribe. But you're yet to find it, right? Qin Mu shook his head and said, I have indeed not found Carefree Village, but I've come to help you guys reignite the sun. And even if I can't reignite it, I still have other abilities. I had learned smithing from a heavenly worker before, so I might just be able to forge new chains for you guys to bring up a new sun. He smiled radiantly and said to the frail little girl, I've come to fulfill my promise. I promised you, and I don't go back on my word. He stood up and raised his head to look at the black sun in the sky. He asked with a calm expression, You had once told me that if I ignite this sun, you will be able to break free. If I ignite this sun now, can you still break free from sunship? I don't know. The flames in Yang Jingjing's eyes suddenly blazed even more vigorously as though hope was renewed in her heart. The old chief of the sun herders had a dim expression as he said, Little friend Qin, even though you're a visitor from Carefree Village, you have yet to go there, and you don't have the ability to reignite the sun. But even if you do so, Sun Guardian won't be able to live for long, her lifespan has been mostly exhausted. Death is like an extinguished lamp, the oil of her life is almost finished. He roused his spirit and said, Don't waste your efforts. We are currently choosing the next Sun Guardian, and as the visitor from Carefree Village, come and witness the birth of a new Sun Guardian. Tonight, the devils will come again and attack, so we have to choose the next Sun person to be prepared for any accidents. Qin Mu shook his head. No matter if I can ignite the sun or not, I have to try. The old chief shook his head and brought the tribesmen to leave as they got ready to choose the next Sun Guardian. Qin Mu took out Sun Jade Eye and placed it on the ground. Raising his head to look at the black sun, he pondered over it for a moment before raising the Jade Eye up high, near the black sun on the chain. Wait here for me, I will come back after reigniting the sun. Lin Yuxiu immediately shouted loudly, When the sun reignites, it will burn you to death. It won't. The sound of a flute could be heard, and the fire flood dragon soared into the sky to follow behind Qin Mu. He then shouted back from far away, With these flood dragons, I can escape alive. Sun Guardian, is your sun a real sun or a fake sun? Lin Yuxiu asked in a hurry. It's a god artifact. It is said that this sun was a treasure forged by heavenly god Ziqing, Yang Jingjing said. This is bad. Lin Yuxiu's scalp crawled. The one who herds cows hadn't asked for details before running away to finish his task. When the treasure of the heavenly god went ablaze, the might of the heavenly god would spread out and probably turn the one who herds cows and his flood dragons to ashes. Wouldn't that mean I can succeed as the cult master? Cai Yunxiang's eyes instantly lit up. Lin Yuxiu gave her a cold look, and Cai Yunxiang hurriedly laughed. I'm just joking, I don't want to be a young widow. I was thinking, since they are sun herders, they should be able to withstand the divine fire of the sun. Maybe we can ask that old chief to protect the cult master. Fatty dragon. Hu Linga called out. The dragon Qilin understood the severity of the situation. He shook his body and transformed into his true form. Lin Yuxiu and Cai Yunxiang jumped onto his back while Yang Jingjing said, They are at the sun shrine of our sun herd tribe. Head over in that direction and it will be the highest shrine. The dragon Qilin immediately exerted his strength to sprint toward the place where they were choosing the next Sun Guardian. When they came to the sun shrine, they saw the symbol of a three-legged crow within the picture of a sun on the doors. Two giants, propped up on their battle axes, stood guarding them. They were adult sun herders, and their bodies were extremely tall and sturdy. Their battle axes were crossed in front of the door to prevent people from going in. "Stop, outsiders!" The two sun herders had solemn looks as they shouted out in dull voices. "The shrine is a sacred ground, outsiders can't barge in." Hulinga jumped down and said, "It's your sun guardian who has asked us to come. Quickly inform your chief that something big is going to happen." "Wait a moment." One of the sun herders immediately went into the shrine. After a moment, he walked out and said respectfully, "Chief has invited all of you inside to observe the ceremony." They entered the shrine and instantly felt minute. The giants of Sun Herd tribe were all gathered there, standing tall. When the girls walked among them, they were merely up to their ankles. The giants were surrounding a circular platform upon which a selection was taking place. Sounds of astonishment came from time to time. Hulinga jumped up as she wanted to take a look at the situation, but how could she do it when the fence was simply too high? Her body was too short, so even if she jumped 15 yards into the air, she still wouldn't be able to see what was happening. Hulinga swayed her tail in a hurry, and her body started to float up. She could then finally see the platform. There were numerous young men and women separated in two groups. In the center of the platform were 3 god statues, and every one of them was a mutant with 3 legs and wings that were spread open. Their bodies were bent, carrying a giant furnace. It was different from usual, since it was circular and its sides had openings. There was nothing like medicinal stones in the furnace. A strong youth of the Sun Herder tribe cutting his wrist and letting his blood flow into the huge circular furnace. He then executed true fire and reigniting the furnace. A ball of fire soon appeared, its flames growing larger and larger. Instantly, blazing rays burst forth from the openings in the furnace, becoming more and more dazzling. Terrifying pulses came from the furnace along with the roars of strange beasts that would grip the heart or anyone who heard them. The sun herders in the surroundings revealed delighted expressions, but at that moment, the rays suddenly dimmed and the flames in the furnace died down. Next, an unbelievably muscular girl went up and sliced open her wrist. She also failed, but she had fared slightly better than the youth before her. An apparition of a fire dragon had actually taken shape in the flames of the furnace. It was just that it lasted for a short while before vanishing. Hulinga looked on the other side of the platform and saw the old chief and some other white-haired elders of the Sun Herd tribe. They were observing the test below. Hulinga's heart stirred slightly, and she simply flew over to them. She heard an elder say, "The body of pure yang is simply too hard to find. Jingjing held out for 10 years, but if we don't find another body of pure yang, tonight might be the night when Sunwell will get invaded." Worry entered the expressions of all elders. For anyone but the body of pure yang, it was difficult to withstand the terrifying and boundless energy of Sunship. If one tried to forcefully master it, they would soon be incinerated. There are simply too few bodies of pure yang. The old chief sighed and said, "If we can't find one, I will control Sunship and fight those devil gods with my life." His constitution wasn't the body of pure yang, but his cultivation was dense, so he could last for some time. Below, on the platform, young men and women tried to light up the sun furnace, but they all failed. This caused the elder's face to grow more and more solemn. Lin Yuxiu and the rest came to where the old chief was, and he raised his hand. A green slab under their feet rose up and lifted them up to observe the ceremony. "Chief, Human Emperor Qin is currently helping you guys reignite the sun. If he succeeds, he'll turn into ashes," Lin Yuxiu said in a hurry. "May Chief please go forward and assist the Human Emperor." She was very clever. She knew his other identities would hardly push the chief of the Sun Herd tribe to aid him, so she just took the identity of the Human Emperor. This video will end here.